on the air with breaking news because Russian news agencies say the former leader of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, has died at the age of 91. Somebody who was instrumental, as you probably remember from history class, in helping to end the Cold War. We're going to talk more about what his legacy meant as this is all developing in just the last couple of minutes. Plus, here at home, not one but two presidents now alluding to that search at Mar-a-Lago, with former President Trump's team gearing up as we speak to respond to the Justice Department's latest filing. That's expected any minute. And President Biden going on offense, slamming some Republicans who basically want to lay into the FBI for their rhetoric around the search. How this could all shape the midterms with just 10 weeks to go. Plus, the state of emergency in Mississippi with the new warning to folks in Jackson, the capital. Do not drink the water. We're on the ground there, where officials think more rain is on the way. Plus, a top Iraqi cleric pleading with his supporters to go home after 2 days of violent protests have left at least 30 people dead. We are live from Tehran. And food prices still going way, way up, but there are some ways to save money, as long as you don't need your tomatoes looking super pretty or your cans super not dented. We're going to take you to a salvage grocery store where the food tastes the same for cheap in tonight's original later in the show. Hey, I'm Hallie, and we just learned right as we were coming on the air, walking to the studio, that Mikhail Gorbachev, the former president of the Soviet Union, has died, according to Russian news agencies. His leadership helping to warm up the relationship with Western countries, credited as an important figure who started a series of events that marked the beginning of the end of the Cold War. I want to bring in now Keir Simmons. And Keir, this is news that is having international ripples tonight because of what, for people who weren't covering news in the late 80s, right? It is hard to overstate how important Mikhail Gorbachev was to the sort of world order at the time that the Cold War was ending.
Yeah, Hallie, I mean, he was one of the singular most important figures of the 20th century, a man who grew up under Stalin and then effectively brought down the communist USSR. He was somebody who brought huge change to Russia, to the Soviet Union, but also to the world, because what he did through his policies of glasnost and perestroika, which were all about liberalizing, about allowing people freedom of views, about saying let's take a new turn, let's not have this kind of dictatorial style of government that was the rule under the Soviet Union. It was all about that, but by bringing in those policies, slowly the problems that the Soviet Union already had showed themselves, and then the whole system crumbled. And then when Eastern European countries, Hallie, began to break away, people began to rise up. Gorbachev, again, did not intervene in the way the USSR had done in the past to prevent that from happening. Now, effectively what that meant, Hallie, was that his legacy was controversial. In the West, he was celebrated for really westernizing Russia and Eastern Europe, for bringing capitalism to Russia and Eastern Europe, really for some people viewed a victory of the West over communism. In Russia, though, his popularity waned as the changes that happened there led to a massive economic decline, and as many Russian people saw it, a decline in Russia's prestige in the world. And of course, what we've seen the decades since then is President Putin trying to re-energize the country with a kind of Russian nationalism and pride in Russia, if you want to put it that way. So the historians will potentially have mixed things to say about Mikhail Gorbachev. What they won't say, though, is that he wasn't important. He was incredibly important to the way we see the world now and what changed in the world in the last century.
It is so important, hear what you're saying, the significance of him as a world leader. And to make sure that I think folks understand that, I know you've done a lot of reporting on Mikhail Gorbachev. I want to play the essentially tribute to his legacy, honoring his life, his obituary, if you will, for folks now. Let's roll it.
By Soviet standards, Mikhail Gorbachev's rule was short, but the last leader of the Soviet Union said his 6 years in power felt like a lifetime. In 1985, the aging members of the Soviet Politburo turned to the 54-year-old Gorbachev to breathe new life into the system. Little did they know the dark-suited bureaucrat with the distinctive birthmark would not only change the Communist Party, but the world.
Let's end the Cold War. Let's end the nuclear confrontation. Let's abolish nuclear weapons. That was revolutionary.
Gorbachev made friends with the Soviet Union's former enemies, none more so than the US President Ronald Reagan. They negotiated a breakthrough nuclear missile treaty and formed a strong bond. That same year, Gorbachev sat down with NBC's Tom Brokaw, a TV first, and Americans were amazed by this open, reassuring Soviet leader and charmed by Raisa, the first Soviet First Lady they'd ever seen. But it was at home where Gorbachev's two big ideas, glasnost or openness and perestroika, economic restructuring, let a genie out of the bottle even he couldn't put back. We could and should have saved the Soviet Union, but we lost politically, he later said. Soviets got more freedom, but nothing to buy. The economy collapsed. While in Eastern Europe, people didn't embrace his reforms, they fled them. But in perhaps his most iconic act, Gorbachev let the Berlin Wall fall, and a year later was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. But back in Moscow, his own colleagues plotted and failed to overthrow him in a three-day coup. When Gorbachev returned from house arrest in the Crimea, he landed in a different world. Russian President Boris Yeltsin was now firmly in charge. Within months, Gorbachev resigned, and the Soviet Union was no more. Years later, he said his main concern was to avoid bloodshed. There could have been civil war in a country saturated with nuclear weapons, he said. He went on to become an international celebrity, making ads for Pizza Hut and Louis Vuitton to fund his foundation. In Russia, few paid attention to his calls for more democracy.
He's a hero to many. The majority of the world, he's a hero. To a minority, he's a villain.
Mikhail Sergeyevich Gorbachev, the man who ended the Cold War, was never forgiven for the demise of his country and died largely reviled by his own people. Keir Simmons, NBC News.
We should note that the Gorbachev Foundation has just confirmed to NBC News the death of the former Soviet leader at the age of 91. Keir is still with us here. And Keir, in his later years, later in life, we know that Gorbachev had reportedly been in and out of the hospital.
That's right, Hallie. We knew that he was sick and getting sicker. In fact, in Moscow, I guess in the last few months, I met with someone who was very close to him, who was talking about how he was suffering. Most recently, he's been suffering from this kidney ailment, and that he was in and out of the hospital. In fact, our senior director, Natasha Lebedeva, just spoke with somebody, as you mentioned, from the Gorbachev Foundation, and that person has confirmed Mikhail Gorbachev's passing. So that confirmation for us here at NBC News that he has died. It won't be a surprise. At age 91, it was something in a way, I suppose, that you could say was coming, but equally, it will be seen by so many, Hallie, as a turning of the page of history, an end of a chapter of history, and an important one.
Keir Simmons, we're glad to have you here to break this down for us, to talk us through this developing news tonight here on the show. Really appreciate it, Keir. Turning to news back here at home in the United States. Any minute, the Justice Department set to lay out an up to 40-page response explaining why they say it's not really necessary for an independent third party to look at the classified documents that were at Mar-a-Lago, as former President Trump wants. So let's look at some of the key questions we have right now. First, how will this DOJ filing on this significant piece of news, these classified documents found at Mar-a-Lago, how will this filing weigh on the judge, right? Will it affect her ability to, or her inclination to appoint a special master or not? She has suggested she is leaning towards yes. Remember, a special master is that independent third party. Second, is the DOJ going to challenge whether or not she's even allowed to appoint a special master? And third, will this filing give us any new breadcrumbs? Will it tell us anything new about the Mar-a-Lago investigation itself? No matter when we get it, and listen, it may be as late as midnight right? The Trump team is going to have until tomorrow night to respond. As NBC News is first to learn, he's beefing up his legal team before a hearing Thursday, hiring Florida's former Solicitor General, who's worked for several top state Republicans, including current Governor Ron DeSantis. Julia Ainsley is with us now. So, Julia, we walked through some of those key questions that we have. Tell us what you are looking for, as I know the timing for this is still up in the air. Could be any minute, could be, 11:59 p.m.
Yeah, that's right, Hallie. It could be a late night. We're going to be glued to our computers until we see it. But as usual, your questions are spot on. How will the Justice Department's filing weigh on the judge? And what might we learn about the Mar-a-Lago search in the first place? And why the Justice Department felt that it was necessary to do this unprecedented search of the former president's residence and to seize these documents? I expect that one of the arguments we might hear, and one that we heard spelled out slightly through the warrant and then through the affidavit when it was partially redacted last week, is that there were documents there that could be key to national security. That's an argument they could likely make to the judge now, in arguing that a special master, any kind of third party that gets involved, those are more eyeballs on really sensitive documents, documents that the president should not have had at Mar-a-Lago in the first place, documents that might spell out something that, if in the wrong hands, if it fell into the hands of our enemies, could actually be damaging and put the United States in a weaker position on the global stage. These are arguments that we could expect to see. And we know that they want a lot of paper to be able to make all of these arguments, Hallie, because not only do they want the judge to understand why this isn't necessary and shouldn't be done, perhaps even that it would be damaging, but they say that there were so many factual and legal flaws with the Trump legal team's request for a special master, they need 40 pages just to spell all that out.
And you make an important point here that they need all those many pages because they're trying to correct the record, basically, from what the Trump team has said. And it's coming as Donald Trump is doing something that, to this point, it has seemed difficult for him to be able to do, which is bring on some sort of big-time legal muscle to help fill out his legal team in all of this back and forth over the Mar-a-Lago search. Tell us more about the person who's now joining in.
Yeah, that's right. Our own Mark Puto here, a colleague of ours, reported, according to two sources, that President Trump has signed a contract to bring on a new lawyer. This is Chris Kise, the former Solicitor General of the state of Florida. He's had a winning record before the Supreme Court, before the Florida Supreme Court. As you point out, he has close ties to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and Senator Rick Scott. He is someone who is seen, as Mark Puto points out, as kind of a political knife fighter. He comes to win. This is really Trump being able to finally get the legal muscle that he needed to fight this in court. Until then, it's really been a strategy of public relations. Hallie, as you know better than anyone, Trump loves to distract from the other question. So he doesn't want us talking about what these documents might say. He wants us talking about whether or not the FBI should have been in there in the first place, and should they be the people reviewing this. That's why we're having this whole debate over the special master. But with Chris Kise, he may actually be able to get more arguments that would go before a judge that could lean in his favor. You have to remember, though, it's taken him more than 3 weeks since that search to be able to get this kind of legal muscle. And that's, Hallie, because so many lawyers turned him down. He's known as being very divisive. It could be divisive to someone's career, to the firm they work for, or also he's known as kind of stiffing over some of his previous lawyers and not paying as much as he should have paid. And as we know, Trump needs a lot of legal muscle, not just for this case, but for a number of investigations, including what might happen if we see the DOJ decide to investigate and press charges for his role in January 6th or in election fraud, claims of election fraud and interference in the 2020 election.
Real quick, Julia, when you talk about January 6th and the investigation that's being done, not just for the Department of Justice, but I'm also thinking that the Select Committee is doing too, Tony Ornato, who is the head of the former president's Secret Service detail, has resigned this week. He's confirming to NBC News that he is no longer in his position at the Secret Service. He's been there something like 25 years. He says this resignation is long planned and that he still intends to speak with the DOJ, the DHS-IG, right, Inspector General, about some of these missing text messages, et cetera. But this is getting some attention here because of the timing.
Right. He's also said he'll cooperate with the January 6th committee. A lot of key questions for him because, of course, Cassidy Hutchinson said that he was her source to understand what happened inside that presidential vehicle when Trump wanted to turn the car around and go toward the Capitol rather than back to the White House on January 6th. It is getting a lot of attention, but the Secret Service is telling us this was a retirement, that he became eligible for retirement earlier this summer and that he's moving over to a private sector. But Tony Ornato will always be one of the most interesting figures out of the Secret Service because he did what so few others do, is that he actually switched over under the Trump administration to become an operational advisor and then switched back into the Secret Service.
Julia Ainsley, thank you. I imagine you're pouring yourself another cup of coffee for what is expected to be a long night for you. Appreciate it, friend. You know who else is talking about the search at Mar-a-Lago? President Biden, who in the last hour or so is laying out his case for why voters in Pennsylvania should back Democrats by talking about crime. The president's basically saying, look, let's boost police training. He's laying out his plan to reduce gun violence. He says he is determined to ban assault weapons. We'll talk more about that in a second. But as part of this law and order message, he is also going on the attack against Republicans. Watch.
You can't be a party of law and order and call the people who attacked the police on January 6th patriots. I'm opposed to defunding the police. I'm also opposed to defunding the FBI.
Now, that defunding the FBI thing you just heard, that line is coming from some on the far right who are upset over the lawfully executed search at Mar-a-Lago. And it's part of this broader strategy by President Biden to get back to what was a winning message in 2020, that this election is a battle over what he calls the soul of the nation. That's the pitch he's going to make later this week in Philadelphia, in prime time, by the way. One of several trips he's taking to Pennsylvania, very important swing state, over the next week. He's also planning to hit Wisconsin and Ohio soon. And yes, the calendar has a lot to do with this. We are only 70 days until polls close for the midterms. But it's also because the president's getting a little bit more popular. Look at this. He's up 6 points, his approval rating over the last month. Still underwater, but historically pretty much in line with where recent presidents are in August of their midterm year. Mike Memoli is traveling with the president in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, as he is now on his way home. Mem, you are there with the cleanup crew, so thank you for hanging out. We've just heard from the president, though, in the last maybe couple of hours or so. And what's interesting to me is the timing of this speech. It was planned for last month. The president got COVID. The whole thing was delayed, right? But what happened in that month? This lawfully executed search at Mar-a-Lago, classified documents found at the former president's home. This is a new twist that the president is now addressing, and we heard him do so today after trying to walk a line, I think, of supporting federal law enforcement and showing some distance between the White House and the DOJ on this.
Yeah, obviously, Hallie, this is a president who wants to make clear that what the Justice Department is doing independently of any interference from the White House. That they appointed Merrick Garland, nominated him. He was confirmed in part because he is a former judge, somebody who was seen as completely above the fray. Now, what is so important, and you talked about it, timing is everything in politics, right? The president was going to give this speech about a month ago, and he really has looked for every opportunity he can to talk about the fact that he and the Democratic Party he leads is not really about defunding the police, but funding police. And the way that he's used to try to illustrate that in the past is to talk about funding from the American Rescue Plan, to talk about proposals he's made to increase the number of law enforcement on the ground, to train them in accordance with his executive order. What we have seen in the past month is President Trump, the raid on Mar-a-Lago and the rhetoric coming from the far right, the extreme MAGA, as the president likes to put it, has really made that message, given the president a much more salient way to present this as a choice to voters for the fall. It's one thing, as he said, to be pro-police, but you can't be pro-insurrection at the same time. We've talked about the effort by the president to flip the script. This is an important way, not just on a messaging front, but politically. This is a region here in northeast Pennsylvania represented by a congressman who was one of the few Democrats who actually managed to win re-election in 2020 while Donald Trump carried the district. So this is a message directly at those independent voters and even Republican-leaning voters, while President Biden tries to cast the party as it stands now as outside the mainstream and not even, as he used to say, and will again, I'm sure, this is not your father's Republican Party.
You know, you talk about this fight for the soul of the nation as the president has framed it. We're going to hear from that a lot. What's interesting also to me is who he is standing next to and not standing next to when he delivers these messages, because some of the candidates in competitive districts are kind of like, hey, thanks, but no thanks, right, when it comes to being seen with President Biden. Tim Ryan, for example, Marcy Kaptur in Ohio telling voters she doesn't work for Joe Biden. In Pennsylvania, John Fetterman will appear with President Biden, but will challenge him and tell him, hey, legalize cannabis, right? He's going to have a little bit of a collegial head-to-head, I assume. How does the White House, how does the president navigate this with people who aren't all that jazzed to see him there, who also need to win?
So this is a White House that says it's very careful. It works very closely with the party committees, with the leadership in Congress to make sure that whatever the president is doing as he ramps up that travel schedule is not going to hurt Democrats. He likes to say this all the time. I'll campaign for you or against you, whatever helps you the most. And so they kind of tailor these events in ways that allow a member of Congress like Matt Cartwright, who is in a toss-up race, very difficult re-election this fall, to come and talk about an issue that's important to him. What a president can do in a midterm election, as he will do on Thursday night, is try to nationalize the race, to really set the agenda, talk about ways in which voters should be looking at the choice before them in the fall. But an event like today is a way in which the president can help a candidate localize a race by talking about an issue that's important to them. And you'll see that when the president does go into some swing districts through the fall. One, for instance, he's going to go to Battleground, Ohio. Tim Ryan, running for the Senate there, has been reluctant to appear with him. He will at that event. Why? Because Joe Biden is breaking ground on a factory that's creating jobs in Ohio. So that's really the way the White House is trying to walk this fine line with these Democrats in the weeks ahead.
Mike Memoli, thank you very much. Good to see you. Appreciate it. Safe travels home. The U.S. today says Russia is getting some weapons reinforcement in its war against Ukraine, courtesy of Iran and the combat drones that they've sent to Moscow. We know that the Kremlin is planning to use them on the battlefield, according to multiple U.S. sources, and that this is just the beginning, that Russia's planning to import hundreds more. It's coming as you have a team of nuclear experts meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. They're now on their way for a visit to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. Russia and Ukraine both accuse the other of shelling around it. So today the EU is like, hey, we're going to send Ukraine millions of iodine tablets just in case people in Ukraine need it to protect from radiation poisoning. Also in Ukraine today, 2 U.S. senators, Amy Klobuchar and Rob Portman, flying over to meet with President Zelensky, telling NBC News that we are standing, they say, with democracy and freedom. Megan Fitzgerald is live in Ukraine, joining us now. So let me take some of these headlines here, Megan, because you have this news from U.S. officials telling our team that some of these new Iranian drones are kind of already defective. They haven't really been performing correctly. How does this compare to what Ukraine has? And what else are we hearing on this front and generally about the war in Ukraine from these senators who have arrived now for this visit?
Well, what we know is that the Ukrainians are supplied with what we gave them and what countries like the United Kingdom have given them. So we know that they have quality weapons that they are using in this war. As for the drones that you're speaking of, yeah. So the Iranians gave the Russians hundreds of drones, and among them are some that are defective. And so these drones, though, are supposed to be conducting surveillance and also able to fire weapons. But again, among them are some that don't work properly. But it is another tool in Russia's toolbox as they continue this invasion here. Meanwhile, we did have an opportunity to speak with the senators when they came into Kyiv today. They talked with President Zelensky. They wanted to stand in solidarity with the people here of Ukraine. They spoke candidly about the successes that they have seen. They talked to us a little bit about that counteroffensive that we are seeing the Ukrainians execute in the southern part of the region here. And they said that it's working well. And in fact, that the Ukrainians have already been able to take back 2 villages as this counteroffensive rages on. Hallie.
Talk about the nuclear plant situation, Megan, because you've got the EU sending iodine tablets. You have nuclear experts who could be there and be seeing this as soon as tomorrow in the midst of what feels like is constant shelling. This feels like it is at a pain point, right? Like a tipping point here as it relates to the concern over this nuclear plant.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is a very, very dangerous and sensitive operation that's happening here. These 14 men and women who are potentially going to be making their way to this plant, they are expected to arrive tomorrow. But look, the Russians are calling the shots here. We know that Russian media is reporting the fact that the parameters in place are that they will eventually get into Russian-controlled territory. Over the last 24 hours, we have seen the Russians shelling that area. Ukrainian officials say This is just a way that the Russians are trying to intimidate this team of 14 people that go inside. Once they make it to the plant, we understand that they will have 1 day to conduct their business. They will be able to look at 2 reactors. There are 6 in this massive nuclear plant there, and they will have to do this by the evening, and that's when they have to go. So will this be successful? What will actually happen once they're inside this plant? These are the questions that we just don't know because, again, this is Russian-controlled territory. The Russians are calling the shots, Hallie.
Megan Fitzgerald, live for us in Ukraine. Megan, thank you. We're staying overseas to Iraq now, where cleric Muqtada al-Sadr told his supporters today he was giving them an hour to leave immediately after nearly 2 days of violent protests there. Look at some of the scenes from this, right? Police and protesters fighting, multiple people firing guns. We saw some really huge crowds. At least 30 people were killed, more than 400 others hurt. Some people even managed to get into the government palace. Look at this, even into the pool, right? So if you're looking at this and you're going, what in the world is going on? This started Monday, okay, when al-Sadr said he'd resign from politics. His supporters did not take that well, so they stormed the Green Zone. This is an area that used to be the U.S. military stronghold there. Hallie Arouzi joins us now. And Hallie, it seems like the area is cleared up as of now, but where does the situation stand on the ground, and how does this develop?
Hey, Hallie. Well, it's certainly been a very bloody 48 hours there with loyalists of that powerful Shia cleric transforming Baghdad's green zone into a war zone, fighting with security forces and rival militias, bringing the capital to a standstill. But the running battles ended today with a single word from one man. Muqtada al-Sadr told his supporters to withdraw, and almost immediately, Hallie, the fighting stopped. His loyalists have now put down their weapons and they've left that very heavily conflicted zone. Following his calls for withdrawal, Iraqi leaders, including the caretaker premier, expressed their thanks to al-Sadr. They praised him for his restraint. And Hallie, the protests and the heavy clashes that have so far killed around 30 people and wounded 400 others may have ended for now, but the political impasse that brought this chapter of unrest is far from over as the fight for the balance of power continues in Iraq. And it's been a very, very deadly balance of power for quite some time now. It's been 10 months that has rocked Iraq for this struggle for power. Iraq's government has been deadlocked since al-Sadr won the party's nomination back in 2021, but he wasn't able to get a majority government to form a proper coalition. He refused to talk to the Iranian rival Shia militias there, and that basically put the country into a power vacuum that's been ongoing for 10 months and is now not showing any signs of abating. So right now they're trying to calm the situation down. The fighting has left on the streets, but the feeling is that it will again spike up because there is no unity between these rival militias and groups in Iraq. And the most powerful one is run by al-Sadr.
Hallie Arouzi, thank you so much for that reporting. Good to see you. We got a lot more ahead this hour, including a growing catastrophe, it looks like, in Pakistan, with floodwaters displacing nearly 500,000 people. Really bad flooding there. More than 1,000 people have been killed. The new call for help right away. Plus, a new strategy to fight monkeypox in the U.S. We've got details on the targeted vaccination push set to be rolled out soon. Coming up. Texas health officials say somebody with monkeypox has died. Now, we want to be clear. It's not yet known whether monkeypox was the cause of death. This is somebody who had a compromised immune system. But it comes as we're waiting to learn more about not just this case, but the White House's plan today that they just rolled out to address a real issue when it comes to monkeypox. The CDC says data shows fewer black people have gotten the monkeypox vaccine compared to everybody else. About 10% of those shots have been given to black people, even though they account for a third of U.S. cases. This new plan comes as this country is battling the biggest monkeypox outbreak in the world right now. Here in America, more than 18,000 cases have been confirmed across the country. Dr. Ashke Sayal joins me now. It's good to see you back on the show. Thank you. Let's talk about monkeypox. It is generally not life-threatening, although people with compromised immune systems tend to be at higher risk of getting sicker. What do we need to understand about this case in Texas here? I think it's important to put some context around it.
Yeah, Hallie, and I think what you said earlier was really important. You know, this was a patient, from what we know, who was severely immunocompromised, and this does remain a very rare outcome. We're you know, above 40,000 cases globally, and we've only seen a handful of deaths. So, you know, while this is a really tragic situation, and our hearts go out to the families who lost a loved one today, I want to emphasize this is a rare outcome, and we really need to learn more about what it is about the virus that caused the death in this case.
Talk about this White House program, because we described some of the concern about inequity. The idea behind this program is to try to directly reach queer communities of color where there may be other barriers to getting shots, right? From a public health perspective, from a fighting this monkeypox outbreak perspective, how important is that?
It's really important. So what we really need to do here is meet people where they're at. And so what the Biden administration is announcing today is that, you know, there's some upcoming pride festivals that are in areas predominantly with people of color. And they're planning on going out there and meeting them where they're at and getting these vaccines to the people who need it most. And just on a general note here, I mean, this is something we saw with COVID where, you know, there was a time where you could get vaccinated outside a basketball arena and go watch Steph Curry play the Lakers and everyone goes home a winner. So we really need to meet people where they're at and get those vaccines out as best we can.
Dr. Ashke-Sayal, thank you very much. Appreciate that perspective. It's important. Thanks.
Yep.
Something else the CDC is getting ready for, a wave of potential COVID cases this fall. With NBC News getting an exclusive look you will only see here inside a Pfizer plant, as that plant gets ready to make and roll out updated booster shots to fight those anticipated new infections. Any day now, we think the FDA could authorize the new shot that targets Omicron subvariants BA4 and BA5. That's like what's most of the, like if you're getting COVID, if you know somebody who's getting COVID, they probably got one of these subvariants, okay? Moderna is working on an updated booster too, and the government plans to roll out a combined 175 million doses from both companies. Our Stephanie Gosk talked with Mike McDermott, the chief global supply officer at Pfizer, who says they're able to turn those doses around ASAP.
So assuming we get approval from FDA and CDC, which is our process, we have doses ready virtually immediately.
You can watch more of Stephanie's full report tonight on Nightly News, 6:30 Eastern on your local NBC station. You can also watch it on streaming, by the way, later tonight. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, the United Nations putting out an appeal today for emergency money for Pakistan. They need help. They're asking the world to give Pakistan its attention. A third of that country is underwater. More than 1,000 people have been killed. The damages, $10 billion at least. This quote-unquote monster monsoon, as they call it, that hit Pakistan has left almost 500,000 people out of their homes. Number 2, Taiwan's military fired warning shots at a Chinese drone that buzzed a small island controlled by Taiwan, according to a military spokesperson. The drone then went on back to China after the shots were fired. This is the first time warning shots have been fired in something like this, according to Reuters. You know the tensions between China and Taiwan have been really high ever since House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited earlier this month. Number 3, FBI agent Timothy Thibault, who's come under fire from some on the right for his alleged role in the Hunter Biden investigation, well, he's resigned, according to a senior law enforcement official. Republican Senator Chuck Grassley has accused Thibault of improper conduct, as he put it, in the Hunter Biden investigation, saying Thibault tried to shut down investigatory activity, etc. The investigation into Hunter Biden's business practices is still continuing. Keeping in mind, of course, Thibault was the assistant special agent in charge of the Washington field office, not the Baltimore office where that investigation is being run. Number 4, if you use Facebook's gaming app, this may not be news to you, but the app on Android and Apple is shutting down just over 2 years after it launched. Facebook told users the app will no longer work or be available in the App Store starting October 28th. Even though the app is shutting down, you can still do some of this stuff on Facebook's actual webpage on its streaming platform. Number 5, hey, I know you've seen this. Serena Williams, she is not done. We had to talk about her because everybody's talking about her. Second round of the U.S. Open. You know, the place was, how many celebrities were at Arthur Ashe Stadium last night? Like all of them. All of the celebrities were watching Serena as she won her first round, heading to the second round. Still more tournament for her, but you know, a lot of people are rooting her on as she prepares to retire, or as she says, evolve to the next thing. Coming up here on the show, first a water crisis, now a state of emergency in parts of Mississippi. All of it because of really bad weather. Several states watching storms and extreme heat as we end August. That's all next. Right now, folks in Jackson, Mississippi, do not have reliable water. Right? The governor is saying do not drink the water because of Ironically, too much water, flooding, which pushed the Pearl River to a really dangerous level. There is a state of emergency now for Jackson, which, of course, is the capital of Mississippi. Some people don't have any water pressure, and this is not good, right? They don't have it to drink. You can't flush your toilets. It's a tough situation, and to some people, it is extraordinary that it's happening in a city like Jackson, the capital of the state. Extreme weather is affecting other parts of the country, too. In the Midwest, you've got really powerful winds up to 80 miles an hour that knocked out power to nearly 700,000 homes and businesses in Illinois and Minnesota. Hundreds of flights had to be canceled. More than 50 million people are trying to get away from a dangerous and record-breaking heat wave out west. Temps could get up to 112 degrees later in the week in L.A. County. I want to bring in Michelle Grossman to talk more about all of this. And can I start, Michelle, with Jackson, right? Because showers and storms are moving south. Any rain on ground that is already saturated there could mean more flooding in some of those spots. It is, your hearts break for people there who don't have water to drink, don't know when they're going to get more water, as it feels like this emergency response is still unfolding.
Yeah, it's the worst case scenario. And I was listening earlier today to the mayor saying, even sort of bettering their infrastructure is going to take millions of dollars. So it's not going to be a quick fix over the next couple of days. And it's going to be a long road ahead of them. And yes, we do still have storms in the forecast tomorrow. We have a cold front that's going to get hung up on the Gulf Coast states. So we're going to see more rain there. Unfortunately, the good news is it's not going to add to the Pearl River flooding. We're starting to see that receding. We're continuing to see that receding. So that is the good news. But still so much water on the back streets, on the back roads, still cars submerged. So that scenario is not over, and they just don't need any more rain there. In the Northeast, we're going to see some rain tonight. So let's take a look at what we're looking at right now, because, Hallie, you're probably hearing that rain and seeing that lightning and thunder outside, because we're seeing those storms right now over D.C. It's a long stretching cold front from New England all the way to the southern plains, and yes, that includes the Gulf Coast states. You can see lots of lightning along this cold front. It's clear to make out where it is, and it's going to head on off to the east. So we're going to be watching the chance for severe weather tonight. The good news is we had something like 233 wind reports yesterday. We're not going to have that tonight, but we certainly could see winds kicking up to 60 miles per hour, and that alone can cause some damage. So this is what it looks like right now in the Northeast. You see that lightning. You see those colors, reds, oranges, yellows. That's where we're seeing the heaviest rain. So as we've seen all summer long, the extreme weather conditions, any of these shower storms can unleash a lot of rain in a short amount of time, sort of those torrential downpours. And that's what we're seeing in spots this evening. So we're going to continue to watch this cold front move to the east. It's going to get off the coast tomorrow in the Northeast, but then it gets hung up in the Southeast and also the Gulf Coast states. So that is not good news. We're going to see it hung there for the next couple of days, and we're going to watch the potential for some flash flooding there. Here's that severe threat for tonight: Syracuse, Scranton, Philly, D.C., Richmond. We could see winds gusting to 60 miles per hour. And then also, Hallie, I'll just end it here. We're looking at 56 million people out west under a dangerous heat alert, not only today, it's Tuesday, but through next Tuesday. So we're going to be watching this for quite a while.
I was going to ask you about that, because that's not something that's like one and done today. From what I understand, that is something that we'll probably be talking about it again in 48 hours from now.
Oh, and much longer than that. And that's the problem. It's a cumulative effect of a heat wave on your body. So it's going to be a big story over the next week or so.
Michelle Grossman, thank you for being on top of it and for bringing it to us here on the show. Appreciate it. Still ahead this hour, keeping the fridge full, keeping the pantry full, even with costs still going up. We're going to take you to a place that sells stuff a lot of grocery stores don't want. Would you buy an ugly tomato? Would you buy a dented can? It's cheap, still tastes good. Salvage Grocers next. NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day, and because you couldn't possibly read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. From our Northeast Bureau, listeria concerns for cheese lovers in the D.C. area here. Hate to say it. A Pennsylvania-based creamery issued a recall for stuff it sold at farmers markets in the city. The FDA found some bacteria during a routine sampling program. No illnesses have been reported so far. The creamery has already stopped production and distribution of all products and is asking consumers to throw out any of the listed cheeses. Head to the FDA website. You can see the specifics there. From our West Coast Bureau, the Los Angeles Coliseum is rolling out plans to celebrate its 100th anniversary next year. This venue we're talking about has been used for some of the biggest and most iconic sporting events, including opening and closing ceremonies for the Olympics, for Super Bowls, even LA Dodger baseball. The centennial event at the Coliseum will be celebrated with the launch of an all-new logo, too. From our Midwest Bureau in Nebraska, a guy in Nebraska, this particular guy in Nebraska, Nebraska man in pumpkin, is trying to become a world record holder. Yes, he's in a big pumpkin. That's like a real pumpkin. He dug it out. World's biggest jack-o'-lantern. I don't know if that's true, but certainly he's trying to break a record. We know that that's true. He's paddling 38 miles down the Missouri River. That pumpkin weighs 846 pounds. The whole journey took him something like 10 hours. The Guinness Book of Records says they're currently reviewing this. But hey, Nebraska guy, get it. We are here for you. We are cheering you on with a beer or a LaCroix in hand, whatever you're drinking. To the economy now, where new job and housing reports released today are giving us some good news and some bad news about where the economy is headed. With the Fed trying to use its tools to bring down the high cost of, as you know, stuff that you're paying for. It's expensive. So here's the deal. We found out today from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that nearly 1 million more job openings are out there than they thought in July. In total, more than 11 million. Economists say this means the worker shortage. This shows the shortage is still very real, with more openings than workers, like a 2-to-1 ratio on that. If you're in the market to buy a house, yes, those prices are still high. They're up 18% this summer compared to this time last year. But the good news is those high prices are slowing down. Why? Because there are higher mortgage rates. That's kind of starting to cool the housing market. And even better news, consumer confidence is the highest it's been since May, which means more people are feeling better about the economy again. Specifically, the fact that there are jobs out there, the possibility of making more money, overall conditions in the business world, too. And that tees us up for tonight's original, a story with in-depth reporting on a topic we've been keeping an eye on. And tonight it's about your grocery bill. How's it looking these days, right? Is it higher? Are you feeling it in your budget? That's because inflation is taking a bite out of those bills. Look at this. Prices for stuff like bakery products, fruits and veggies, dairy, milk, etc. They've all gone up since last year, anywhere from 9 to 15%. So some smart shoppers are heading to a different type of grocery stores to try to beat those high prices and save some money. The products may not be the prettiest, but the prices are the cheapest out there. Emily Aketa has more.
Ruth Massia's weekly grocery store trip always starts here.
I call this the TJ Maxx of grocery stores because you get the max for the minimum.
At the Outlet, a unique Connecticut grocer that's crucial in affordably feeding her family of 4.
Has it made a big difference in your grocery shopping budget?
By far, yes.
It's called a salvage grocery store, selling slightly damaged, discontinued, or dated items at deeply discounted prices. Similar stores are popping up around the country.
So you also have some specialty foods in store.
We do.
Isaac Schwecke opened the Outlet in 2014 with a mission of sustainability to cut down on the more than 100 billion pounds of food waste generated in the U.S. every year. He had worked as a manager in the industry and saw the Outlet as a way to divert still consumable products away from landfills.
They may have overbought the product. There might be damage in the warehouse. That's where we come in and we'll say, hey, look, we have an end-of-life solution for you versus it going to a landfill.
But in the past year, the Outlet and salvage stores alike have provided critical relief for families hammered by soaring inflation. The cost of groceries has surged more than 13% from last year.
What are people's reactions when they see these sales?
Oh, when people come in here, they just can't believe it.
On average, items in this store run about 25% off, but with a closer look, you can get even deeper discounts. Take this Skinny Pop popcorn, for instance. Typically, a bag runs for $3.50. Here, you can get 2 bags for the price of $3. And the store, it's not just limited to food. There are other kinds of products. For instance, Huggies diapers here, $10 off.
And shoppers like Cindy Blaza are showing up for the savings.
I can get medication, I can get milk at a discount.
A 25% increase in sales at the Outlet over last year.
Are we seeing a broader population take advantage of stores like this?
Most definitely. It is on a rise. If it was up to me, I would open up a dozen stores.
And another major salvage grocery store chain called Grocery Outlet saw an 11% spike in sales as well.
I have a salvage grocery store near me, and I went in there the other day, and the owner told me that business is booming.
Lindsay Obro runs Buy Salvage Salvage Food, a website that maps out where you can find similar grocers, from Dickey's in North Carolina to American Discount Foods in Arizona. She says her site has seen more than 5 times the amount of traffic compared to last year. So if you're new to salvage stores, veteran shoppers recommend you scoop up your favorite items when you see them. Remember, sell and use by labels are not safety dates, aside from baby formula. And unless you freeze an item, plan to consume your purchases quickly.
It makes me feel good all around knowing that I'm helping the environment and I'm also helping the community by saving money.
Emily Ikeda, NBC News, Southington, Connecticut.
Some incredible numbers in there. Still ahead this hour, Elon Musk tries to make it clear yet again there are reasons he doesn't want to buy Twitter. We're going to break down his latest claims, why it relates to that whistleblower news from this past week, and what it means for the legal battle ahead. Twitter tonight is blasting Elon Musk's latest attempt to get out of his $44 billion deal to buy the company as, in their words, invalid, wrongful, trying to turn the tables back on Musk. Saying that Twitter, they say, they're like, hey, we haven't violated any of our obligations. They're saying it's Elon Musk and his team who, as they put it, knowingly, intentionally, willfully, and materially breached the agreement they came to for Musk to buy the company for big bucks. It comes after Musk's legal team filed a second termination notice with the SEC today, the first filed back in July. This new one includes some recent whistleblower allegations of privacy and security concerns brought in to defend his attempt to back out of the deal. That whistleblower, remember we covered this on the show, is Twitter's former head of security, basically saying there are issues with the company. Twitter's standing their ground. Twitter says they intend to enforce this deal with Musk and close the transaction. They are trying to get paid. I want to bring in Alex Sherman from CNBC. So, Alex, help us understand this. Does Elon Musk have a legitimate case to make here, or is he grasping at straws?
So there's sort of two ways of looking at this. The first, which would benefit Elon Musk, is that this complaint by Twitter's former head of security is a get-out-of-jail-free card for him. In other words, this is a gift handed in his lap, that there are real issues that could amount to fraud baked into Twitter, and potentially a judge could see this and allow Musk to get out of the deal. Now, the other way of looking at this, which is not to Musk's advantage, is that this is a desperation play. Musk already has an argument for why he shouldn't have to buy Twitter, and that has to do with Twitter misrepresenting the amount of bots or spam users, saying it's actually way over 5%. Twitter says no, it's about 5%. This is a brand new argument. It required an entirely new letter arguing on Musk's behalf that he shouldn't have to buy Twitter. That seems potentially as though Musk is grasping at straws. And he says, hey, look, if argument number 1 doesn't work, let's go to argument number 2, and maybe that will work. So that will be up to a judge to decide.
So what's interesting, too, is like the way that this sort of whistleblower revelation coming out has put a different lens or filter on the way that I think some experts are viewing this Elon Musk trial that is set to start in the middle of October, Musk versus Twitter, basically. What happens there, right? Like if they can't come up to agreement, does the back and forth incentivize Twitter to come to some kind of a deal? Can they do that? Is there a settlement? Could Elon Musk pay some but not all of what he said he would do? Like, what are the options here?
Yeah, by the way, Musk's lawyers, another piece of information we learned today, Musk's lawyers are now trying to push back that trial date to November from October. We will see if they are successful in doing that. But right now, as you mentioned, it's set for October 17th to start and will likely take a week. Look, everything is still on the table in terms of a potential settlement. If you speak to investors and experts around this, some still think a deal will come together simply at a lower price. Some feel like this will definitely go to trial. And even if it does go to trial and Musk loses, it's still possible that Twitter and Musk could come up with some settlement, potentially with Elon Musk paying damages to Twitter in the billions of dollars. Or again, potentially, even after a trial, the two sides could theoretically come together and, say, lower the price by a little bit. If the result of that is that Elon Musk agrees, look, I'm going to own this thing and I'm going to run it with reason to run the company moving forward. What we don't know is how in is Elon Musk at this point. Does he really want to run Twitter? That is still an open question.
Alex Sherman from CNBC, always great to see you. Thank you for that breakdown. Appreciate it. That does it for us for this hour. It's good to be back with you. We'll have more for you here tomorrow. Same time, same place. Coverage picks up right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.